Wow, Halloween, it's here. It's upon us. Hope you like the Squid Game intros. But Thomas, I didn't see
It's funny you mentioned that. I was going to go try to find a mask, but I only had a Baby Yoda mask and I couldn't find it in the amount of time to put it on since, it is Halloween.
Fair enough.
I'm probably the only person that hasn't seen Squid Game yet.
You need to. You can watch it in one sitting.
Well, my son has seen it and he liked it, so I probably will, but I'm going to wait till I get through with my other stuff.
Fair enough. Katie's got a list of things that she's trying to watch on Netflix, and I think Squid Game. I'm trying to get her into F1 Drive to Survive. I'm trying to convince her to go to the Formula One race next year in Austin, so we'll see if that happens. But
good luck with that.
They're making a big push to get more Formula One here in the United States, so I think it's going to be an interesting thing to follow what they're marketing, because typical Formula One in the United States isn't as big.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's just go ahead and get into it. Welcome to season 4, episode 3 of the Business Communicators, the #1 podcast in the world for communications and marketing professionals. It's a verifiable fact. Fact check us on that. We'll provide you some sort of evidence. But my name is Austin Staton, joined alongside my co-hosts Hattie Horn and Thomas Bain on this journey as we explore the world of communications and discuss the key issues and trends that impact our industry. And Hattie, you weren't with us the last time we recorded. You were over in Hilton Head doing a very important walk. Tell us about it. How'd it go?
Well, as you know, we're at the end of the month where this is Breast Cancer Awareness Month. And as a breast cancer survivor, 16 years in December, people. Yeah. I like to participate in activities that are fun and help to also support trying to hopefully eradicate cancer. That's another story. Anyway, I was in Hilton Head. It was 7 of us ladies, and we had a house, big 5-bedroom house, 4.5 bathrooms, a private bathroom. I mean, in a private pool against a golf course, which is awesome. But the goal is to walk 10 miles a day for 3 days. So that's 30 miles total. The first day, because I had my sister with me, it was a little bit slower. But the second day and the third day, it was all good. 30 miles, people. I am so excited about that. Plus, I raised money in support of it. And Hilton Head is just gorgeous. Y'all, the weather was beautiful and the food was terrific.
I saw Thomas's eyes light up when you mentioned weather, because he's the weather guy. Thomas?
No. Go Astros. We are in Houston. Actually went to a baseball game and the roof was open at Minute Maid, so that doesn't happen very often, so that was kind of nice. But I'm very happy to hear that you were able to raise a lot of money, and we need to drop in our show notes that if you want to donate to whether it's Hattie's Walk or to just the American Cancer Society or anything like that, because cancer is something that's very near and dear to my heart as well. And other than that, I'm doing great. And, last time Hattie wasn't here, but Austin made fun of my dancing skills. So in lieu of this time, to keep it light and fun, I'm going to give a little PSA to all of our listeners. And I'd say, please keep your hands and feet inside the car at all times while listening to this podcast, because it's going to get entertaining, especially with our guests coming up.
Yeah, we're excited about this, and we've got a fun guest. Dane Jensen is going to join us here in a few moments. He's the CEO at Third Factor, instructor at Queen's University and the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. So we'll be discussing performing under pressure in a disruptive world. We're also going to talk a little bit about Facebook, or I should say Meta, and the name change that they had this week. And we'll talk a little Enes Kanter and some of his social media activity dealing with the NBA's relationship with Nike and Nike's relationship with China and so on and so forth. So it should be an interesting conversation this week. And as always, if you're watching this stream live on Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, or Twitter, feel free to drop a comment. We'll try to reply to as many as we can throughout the show. And if you follow us, or if you don't follow us, we encourage you to follow us on social media. Just search at Biz Communicator on all of the platforms. We're there except TikTok. But, with Thomas's dance skills, we'll try to get there somewhat soon. Maybe not. But if you want to also follow our work, go to thebusinesscommunicators.com, where we post everything there. But let's just go ahead and pivot over to the interview. And Dane Jensen, He is the CEO of Third Factor, an acclaimed speaker, an instructor at Queen's University and UNC Chapel Hill. He's a regular contributor to the Harvard Business Review. He's worked with so many business leaders, Olympians, Paralympians, just a all-around incredible person. He had a new book that was just published in August, The Power of Pressure: Why Pressure Isn't the Problem, It's the Solution. And we'll drop that in the show notes. If you want to check it out, you can buy it. But Dane, thank you so much for joining us on the Business Communicators podcast.
Hey, it's great to be here, everybody.
Hey.
So tell us a little bit more about you, kind of what your day-to-day is, and maybe a little bit about your book before we roll into things. Maybe he froze. It's what happens when it's a live broadcast.
He's showing us how well he can hold his game face under pressure. He might win that one.
Or hold your breath.
Staring contest.
Yeah, we'll try to get Dane back here soon. But if you're watching this live, don't worry. We'll edit this part out in the episode that you listen to on Monday on Spotify.
Yeah, talk about pressure, huh?
It's the new MacBook. It couldn't perform under pressure. So
Apple, if you're listening, we are open for sponsorships, and we will be more than happy to show off your work. That it doesn't freeze under pressure.
Yeah, it looks like he'll be joining us here in just a moment. So I think he's probably restarting. But it was funny, before the show, we were actually talking about the new Apple MacBook that came out last week. I guess that was announced, and it was something that was exciting for a lot of people. I ended up ordering one. It came in yesterday, and Hattie was giving me a hard time about it. And shortly after, Dane joined us in the green room and said that he actually got a new MacBook as well. And so, yeah, that's kind of how things are going. So, all right, looks like we've got Dane back. Dane,
are we talk about performing under pressure, like the critical moment? Like, we're gonna hand it over to Dane, and it's just like boom, the pressure guy is gone.
I hope you were hearing us talk. I was like, maybe he's just showing his mad staring contest skills.
Well, it was so I don't know what happened here. Hopefully that doesn't happen again. But sorry about that. Do you want me to launch right into my day-to-day where you left it off, or if you guys already moved on?
No, that's great. I mean, we were just kind of bantering back and forth, and
right on.
Yeah. So
all right. So sorry about that. I don't know why I'm hardwired over here. I'm not sure what happened. We were saying in the pre-show, I just got a new computer yesterday, so hopefully that's not the issue. Anyways, so I run a little company called Third Factor, and I talk about Third Factor. We're kind of like this cross-pollination hub. So we are an interdisciplinary leadership firm. We actually got our start in the world of elite sport. Did a lot of work with Olympic and Paralympic athletes starting in the early 90s. So been at it for about 30 years now, worked with over 100 Olympic medalists. And what we try to do is we try to cross-pollinate, what can we all learn from each other, really in three main areas. The first is around resilience and performance under pressure. This is kind of us all as athletes to some extent, like we have to perform and get at our best on demand. A lot of what we do is in coaching and leadership. So how do leaders become more effective coaches? And then a lot around collaboration. So, as you mentioned, I teach in academia a little bit. We do a lot of work with big companies on leadership development, and we get to play around in the world of sport as well.
I absolutely love that, because my background is actually in sports. I used to be a sports information director at Baylor, Louisiana Tech, did some sports writing, broadcasting, radio, TV, all that kind of stuff. So this is like totally at my alley. And I love how you mentioned Paralympics in addition to just the Olympics. And for me, I had the opportunity to go to Rio in 2016 for the Paralympics. I was actually supposed to go to Tokyo for the Paralympics, but, COVID and all that kind of came into play. But I think, some of the stories from the Paralympians are just incredibly inspiring. Some were born with disabilities, others, had significant injuries, maybe military veterans that were injured in combat and, turned into amazing Paralympic athletes. I mean, I look at, Brad Snyder, Melissa Stockwell, so many people like that, John Register, just so many incredible athletes. What have you learned from the Paralympic community, I guess, in terms of pressure, resiliency, and kind of how they use that as an advantage?
Oh yeah. I mean, so I've I've had the pleasure of working alongside the Canadian Paralympic Committee. So I'm based in Toronto since 2014. And it's an amazing community. It's an amazing movement to be a part of. It's an amazing group of, world-class elite athletes. And I think for me, the Paralympic movement really does represent the best of sport. When you talk to people that are involved with the Paralympics, whether as athletes or coaches, there is no pot of gold at the end of this rainbow. There is no $40 million Nike endorsement deal. This is about the purity of sport, the love of competition, the intrinsic motivation of, getting better every single day and competing with and winning against the best in the world. Now, that tide is starting to turn a little bit with more broadcast and more, corporate attention, which is welcome and needed and phenomenal. But I do think when it comes to just kind of the triumph of the human spirit, the Paralympics is as good as it gets in sport. You don't have the same stuff that you have sometimes with the Olympics, with the questionable motives and practices of some of the people that are surrounding it. So yeah, I've learned a lot from the Paralympic Committee about what it means to really be driven off of purpose and the motivation that comes along with that. And I do think pressure, a lot of the athletes have pretty remarkable stories around how they have taken, what would be considered adversity of the highest order and use that as a defining moment, use the pressure that accompanied that adversity to do incredible things. One of my most memorable interviews for the book was with Rick Hansen, who you may remember in the 80s. Rick was known as the man in motion. He circumnavigated the globe by wheelchair. He 24,000 miles in 18 months. He wheeled 2 marathons a day for 18 months. And prior to that was a Paralympic champion in wheelchair racing. And when you listen to him talk about the journey that he went on from, being an outdoorsy, rural, athletic kid who suffered a car accident and fractured his spine, that initial period for him was really difficult. Going through the loss, the acceptance of the fact that he wouldn't walk again, and all of the bitter struggle to try and prove the doctors wrong. But then his ultimate ability to take that energy and channel it to doing something that I think, is without parallel in modern history. I think, he's a perfect example of pressure as an ally.
Yeah, I absolutely love that. Channel 4 in the UK, I believe they have the Paralympics contract, and they run amazing advertising leading up to the games. I think they call it like prior to the London games, they had an ad saying, now that, get ready for the main event. Now it's time for the superhumans or something like that.
Yeah.
Just the overall ad campaign for it is brilliant. But, I think from a communications perspective, so many of these athletes, they work with corporations. They go and, it's motivation, kind of telling their story, maybe how to effectively collaborate with, different business units, stakeholders, customers, that sort of thing. Kind of what have you learned from them for the communication strategy and maybe working with corporate executives?
Yeah, I mean, so certainly Channel 4 is a great example of taking the script and kind of flipping it a little bit, right? The whole Meet the Superhumans stuff, I think, is really a different flip, because when you talk about, one of the things that I think gets under the skin sometimes of Paralympic athletes and coaches is that they feel like they're used as inspiration porn, right? It's like it's tragedy and all this stuff, and that narrative, well, it's true, it is also a little bit limiting. And so what I loved about the Channel 4 stuff was, this is not just a story, of somebody who went through a tragedy and somehow has managed to overcome adversity. This is, superhumans, right? These are people who are superhuman and have been able to actually, become enhanced versions of themselves and do things that, we never thought were possible 20 years ago. So I really like what Channel 4 has done in flipping the script a little bit with the Paralympics.
Thomas Hattie.
Well, I was going to ask, kind of building on what Austin was saying about leadership.
Yeah.
And when you talk about performing under pressure, especially when there is a crisis, in my experience, I've seen some who seem to do well. I see others who seem to struggle a lot more. So in that frame, what is it you do that kind of helps them, or what would you say to them that would get them through that, especially those that are struggling?
Yeah, so this is really the book, right? So the whole premise of this book was kind of rooted in one question, which was, what's the most pressure you've ever been under? And this is kind of a question that I started asking pretty informally in my teaching. It was a good question to ask at a break or as like an icebreaker at lunch. But pretty quickly, after I started asking this question, I realized that actually, no matter who you ask this question of, there's a really interesting story on the other side of it. And as you say, some of them are stories of triumph, some of them are stories of struggle. And so I started asking this thing repeatedly. I sought out interesting people to ask. I started asking athletes and Navy SEALs and emergency physicians, but also, execs, people working in marketing, communications, all functions. And what I kind of started to realize is that first and foremost, what people classify as pressure spans basically the entire range of human experience, right? So there's the classic stuff. It's like we got to walk into a big pitch meeting and sell somebody on a vision. We got to take a big exam or give a big speech. Like, there was that stuff. But there's also the stuff that is, I had to hold down a demanding job for, a year while my parents were going through a really difficult time, or, my mom giving her end of life care while there was a big deliverable at work. And everything in between. And so my first realization was like, okay, pressure is, almost encompasses all of the human experience. But then to your question on what makes people good or bad, what I actually started to realize is being good at pressure isn't really one thing. Because when you look at the kinds of experiences that people describe when they talk about pressure, they really do fall into two very different categories. So, I talk about these as peak pressure moments. And these are things that are like the exam, the job interview, the big speech. It's like there's huge pressure, they happen, and then they're over. Then there is the long haul or the grind, which is more of prolonged grinding volume, like many people have experienced over the last couple of years, right? Where it's not like one acute moment, it's just this. And actually what I learned is that the stuff that makes you really good at the peak pressure moments, like the strategies that help you perform on demand, actually don't work over the long haul, and vice versa. And in fact, in many cases, it's actually the opposite that's going to work, depending on whether you're going through the long haul or peak pressure. So we can get into a little bit more of what those are, but that's the first thing for me is being good at pressure is actually two things. It's two different skill sets.
That's interesting, and so I'm going to ask you kind of take it a little bit lighter of a mood, but then it's going to kind of circle back.
Yeah.
Normally, I start off asking, I was at a baseball game, and I always love to ask people around me, what would be your walk-up song? But with you talking about pressure, what made me start thinking about it was, which would you rather do? Hit the game-winning grand slam to win the World Series, or catch the touchdown pass to win the Super Bowl, or score the game-winning goal at the World Cup, or win a gold medal in the Olympics? So that's part of the question. And then which one of those do you think is the most pressure? But then the real question at the end of that is really more along the lines of how in your research, what was some of the themes about how to maintain that drive, that will to do better? Because, we talk about media relations, we practice so that when it does happen, you're almost an autopilot.
Yeah.
Kind of thought process. So sorry, it's a 3-part question. So first one is go. Would you rather win the Super Bowl, World Series, World Cup, a gold medal?
I'm an Olympic, Paralympic guy.
Looks like we lost him again. It's the MacBook. I swear, guys.
Again, Apple.
Yes, kind of doing it for your country.
Oh, Dane, we lost you for a second. So if you can come back and maybe answer that 3-part question again.
The 3-part, yeah.
Yeah, sorry about
that. I gotta unpack it. So yeah, I was saying for me, it's got to be the Olympic gold. I'm an Olympic, Paralympic guy. Okay. As much as I love my Toronto Raptors, I love my Maple Leafs, but I think at the end of the day, it's standing on the podium, it's representing your country. That to me is kind of the best, as good as it gets. And then I think the notion of what is it that we can kind of learn and how do you kind of get good at this stuff? I think the media angle of it is a great example of a peak pressure moment where like you're going to be on camera and you have to perform, right? In sport, we call that performance on demand. And what I've kind of done, and this is when I started synthesizing everything that I had heard, really, when you break pressure down, there are really only three things that combine to create pressure, right? Every high pressure situation, as unique as they are, is a function of a combination of three things. The first thing is importance. So the amount of pressure that we feel is directly proportional to the importance of the outcome of the situation. But the second thing that has to be there is uncertainty, right? Because no matter how important something is, if the outcome is certain, it's not going to really create pressure. We feel pressure as human beings at the intersection of, hey, there's an important outcome at stake here and it's uncertain, right? I don't know which way it's going to go. And then the third thing that creates pressure is volume, right? Which is just the sheer amount of tasks, of decisions, of distractions that kind of surround that importance and that uncertainty. And so when we think of, media hits or having to go live to air, at the height of a crisis or at a critical moment, those peak pressure moments, they tend to be made up of like violent collisions of importance and uncertainty, right? Like there's a lot at stake here and my actions are really going to sway the outcome here. It's in the balance. It's uncertain and I can kind of sway it one way or another. Long haul, on the other hand, which is a little different, the grind really is more about volume, right? It's more about just the weight that I'm carrying over a prolonged period of time. And so I think your notion around we want to prepare until the media stuff is automatic, that to me is reducing uncertainty, right? Which is a great toggle for pressure because the more I can count on it, one of the Olympians I interviewed, he said, the thing I always ask myself before I go on the ice is what's my average? And he said, I'm good enough at this point that my average is going to win. So he's like, I know I don't have to be superhuman out there when I step onto the ice to skate. I just got to do my average. And I think media training is not that dissimilar, right? If you've done 50 interviews and you can go, okay, I don't have to be better than normal. I just have to hit my average here. That starts to reduce uncertainty, which puts you in a better state to perform. So I think that whole notion of preparation as it builds confidence and reduces uncertainty is a huge part of how you kind of start to interact with pressure a little bit.
It, kind of comes back to that sports reference, practice, whether you want to use the Allen Iverson quote or the scene from Ted Lasso. I'm not talking about a game, but practice is incredibly important, training, getting yourself familiar with that situation. And a lot of times we can prepare for those types of situations. We can kind of war game them, plan them out. We know kind of generally what's going to happen. But in 2020, we didn't realize that we would all be working from home, that a pandemic would completely shut down this entire planet, impact so many businesses with something that was completely out of our control. And so many people were maybe dealing with pressure or stress or anxiety for the first time, maybe in their careers and their lives, having to work from home, educate children at the same time. Kind of what have you seen from your research on maybe how, the past 20 months have impacted, the world in terms of pressure and stress?
Yeah, I mean, if you think about the three things that create pressure, importance, uncertainty, and volume, we've had all three of them in spades, right? Like we were dealing with fundamentally important stuff like, financial security, health, life and death in many cases. There was just a tremendous amount and continues to be a tremendous amount of uncertainty. I think the pandemic has been the ultimate teacher that, we cannot control the future. And if you look at any country in the world, the ones that were held up as heroes at first, like, oh, these guys have got it nailed, just wait, right? It's going to swing back around and it's like, oh, actually, we didn't have this figured out. Like everybody's had to deal with that, sine wave of, fortunately, unfortunately, fortunately, unfortunately. And then the volume has just been immense. I don't know about the folks that you guys are talking to, but everybody I talk to, we're working more, less, separation between work. Everything that creates pressure has come together over the past 20 months to create this kind of perfect, mix. And I will say that the things that I have spent most of my time about are two things. The first is manage uncertainty and how do we come to the fact that we need to be able to embrace uncertainty, and not try to act on every single piece of uncertainty to establish control. And I think that's a really difficult one, in particular for people that are high performers, because direct action is a really productive mode, right? When I see something, I act on it and I start to make progress. you try to act on every source of uncertainty over the past 20 months, it just creates a feeling of helplessness and it just reinforces the pressure. And so that ability to come to terms with the fact that, hey, this is going to be long, it's going to be a lot of ups and downs, and I need to be able to embrace that uncertainty with a faith that things will work out as they should in the end. That's been a lot of the discussions I've been having with senior leaders in particular who like to, control and sort of write the future. And then the second one is about volume. And just, I think people often, when volume is creating pressure, people turn to time management, right? They go, I just got to get more efficient. I got to be able to get more done in a day. The problem is that time management is a trap. It's a trap. It's a blind alley. Because, what happens to people who get good at time management? Volume or less volume?
He froze again. But I think that's really interesting, the topic he's talking about time management and how we control the uncertainty of a dog barking in the background. But I'm intrigued to learn more about the time management and how people who are really good at time management actually produce less. I think that's where he's going.
Well, yeah. And what's really interesting when you talk about time management, it could go either way. Just from my perspective, you can have so much organized and think you're doing a great job with time management. And then you see all these things in your list and you say, oh, I'm never going to get this done. So are you really managing your time as well as you think you are? And even if you're not managing your time as well as you think you are you going to freak out about it? Or are you going to say, okay, I'm not going to put this pressure on myself?
Yeah.
So everybody reacts or responds differently to that.
Yeah, and different, pressure situations can, trigger different emotions. Maybe you're equipped and prepared to, handle a crisis response, but maybe you're ill-equipped to handle like an illness in the family. There's so many different things that can, kind of impact, our lives, and maybe we have completely different perspectives on them. So
exactly.
Yeah, and I always like to give people the benefit of the doubt, even through the pandemic and the daily press conferences that were going on, and now that he's in trouble. But I like to give them the benefit of the doubt of, we don't know what's going on behind the scenes. While they might be equipped for this particular crisis, to Austin's point, but there might be an illness in the family, and how people interact are completely different. And all I can say is let's be empathetic to each other.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so we think we have Dane back, maybe. So we'll try to get him back on.
Welcome back.
There we go, Dane.
Back.
There we go.
This has never been an issue for me before. I'm not sure what's going on, so I really apologize.
Hey, it's all good. It's all good. And
it's that new Mac.
Yeah, we are doing a live stream right now, but a lot of our listeners listen to this on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, so they won't know about any of this.
No.
Oh, God.
But we're gonna give Apple the chance to perform under pressure. So Dane needs a new MacBook, even though he just got one yesterday.
I'm hardwired in and everything. Like, I don't know what the hell's going on. Anyways, sorry. So I don't know where you lost me, but time management, not a solution to pressure. It's a great productivity tool. So I don't want to knock time management as a productivity strategy. It helps you get more done, but it's not a pressure solution. It just adds more volume to the pile. So I've spent a lot of time talking to people about how do we actually manage the root causes of volume, the volume of tasks, the volume of decisions, the volume of distractions, because that's where you actually start to get at the root of it, which is really limiting the input.
Yeah, we were just talking about that a few minutes ago. When you talk about time management, I was just saying that, you could have a list of things and they're all wonderful and good. Think you're managing your time. And then you get there and you say, oh man, I don't have enough hours in a day. So it's all in how you respond to it. But the question I have for you, what has been your most high pressure situation and how did you handle it?
Yeah, it's interesting. The one that I always go to, and it's actually the story I opened the book with, is we are lucky enough to have a kind of place on the lake a couple hours north of our house here in Toronto, and we spend a lot of time up there in the summer. And we have a place, my parents have a place, and my sister's got a place, kind of all in a row. And I was up there with my 3 kids and my wife, and my mom was up at the time, and we were kind of sitting on the dock by the water. The 2 older kids were kind of hanging out with us, and my youngest, who was 1 at the time, was playing in a sandbox about kind of 20 feet from shore. And my wife had gone for a run, and so she left me and grandma there to watch the 3 kids. And the older 2 immediately got in a massive water fight, right? They both picked up water guns, started shooting each other. And so my mom and I got really engrossed in separating them and getting them sorted out and kind of getting them settled. And by the time we got them settled, we realized that Henry, who had been playing in the sandbox, was gone. And so, we were calling his name, no response, which is very unusual. He's a really talkative little guy. At this point, he could only crawl. He couldn't walk. And he was between basically the water, which is like a rocky shoreline about 20 feet away. And then on the other side was like a steep forested hill. And so we really were like, where could this kid have gone? He can't walk. To make it up the hill is pretty challenging. And so we started to check the buildings. We got a little bit more and more frantic. Finally, I went, I got to get in the water because, if he's in the water, that's the worst case scenario. And so I went all the way to one end of the property and started working my way along the shoreline. And on the shoreline, there are 3 docks. And I have vivid memories of this period where every time I had to check under a dock, I would get this vivid image in my head of him in his little blue suit, floating under there. And I would go, okay, breath, look under, not there, move on. And so this went on for long enough with me scrambling along the shoreline, my mom and the other 2 kids running around the property, yelling his name, that people from the other side of the lake got in boats, came over, were like, can we help you? Is everything okay? And then finally, after, I think it was probably about 9 or 10 minutes, we heard this cry, and it turned out that he had managed to make it all the way up this hill and over to the neighboring property about 400 yards away. And that for me is, the most acute pressure I've ever felt. When I heard him cry out at the end of that time, I have a vivid memory of just, my physiology was like I had just run, a sprint, like full on, oxygen deficit breathing, hunched over, trying to recover. And so that for me is as acute as I've ever gotten from a pressure standpoint.
Wow.
More pressure than I've been in.
Yeah,
and I think it was a instructive moment for me, Hattie, because this to me is one of those situations. The importance of it was so high, obviously, not just, my wife had left us alone with the kids. I thought, this could be it, right? This could be the line between the life that I used to have and the rest of my life. This could be the demarcation point. And that was a very conscious thought that I had as I was, going through the process of searching the water and trying to find him. And I think, as I debrief this experience, which is now, 7 years in the past 4 years in the past or so, I actually think I did a lot of stuff wrong in this situation. As I started to learn a little bit more, as I did my research and interviews, I think there were a few things that I could have done better in this situation. I went into that attentional tunnel that accompanies pressure, and we got very reactive instead of being able to take a beat and go, okay, what are the highest risk scenarios? Let's rule those out first, right? I should have gotten in the water right away. We should have coordinated better in terms of who was going to do what and who was going to go where. We went into one of the default pressure traps, right? Which is you get straight into fight or flight and you move immediately to action. And so I think that, some of the things that I did wrong in that scenario have been quite instructive to me in terms of, okay, when you're in these moments, you have to be able first to get your physiology under control, right? That starts with getting your breathing low and down to 6 breaths a minute. Once you get your physiology under control, that puts you in a much more stable platform to be able to rationally kind of plot out a course of action. But I went straight to, run, essentially, in that moment.
I think you hit the nail on the head, and you also had the challenge that you were personally invested in the relationship that's going on, because I know it drives my wife crazy and there's something going on. I'm like, okay, take a deep breath. Okay, back away. Don't you care about the kids? No, I do care about the kids. That's why I'm doing this.
Yeah.
I guess one of the questions, probably one of the wrapping up a little bit, is what are some tips you could give to, the kids fresh out of college, to the middle managers all the way up to the executives? One quick takeaway for each one of those levels to help them manage pressure, I guess.
So I think the takeaways, whether you're senior or you're junior, are kind of similar. So for me, the key takeaway that I learned from importance is, at the end of the day, you have to see what you're doing as important. That's really necessary to persevere over the long haul. But you also need to be able to get some perspective on what's really at stake, in particular when it comes to work, right? And that balance of, I have to find meaning in what I do, I have to see it as important, and I have to recognize that at the end of the day, there are lots of really important things in my life that won't change if this pitch goes really badly or if I bomb this meeting. Like, that's what allows us to kind of, act in a controlled way. And then with uncertainty, the things for me, for anybody, are first and foremost with uncertainty, you got to figure out what you can control and work to control it. And once you've identified that, a big part of uncertainty is coming to terms with the fact that you can't predict the future, and that's okay, right? If I'm taking care of the controllables, my ability to, have that patient faith that things will work out in the end, that's the critical thing. And then volume, I actually do think this is one where senior and junior is a little bit different. On the volume side, both of those folks, volume over the long haul is about, the physical platform. It's about sleep, nutrition, movement. And then in particular, in more junior roles, volume is about your ability to have productive prioritization conversations with your manager, right? Because the volume that we accrue in organizations, often comes from the fact that we are overly optimistic about what we can accomplish. And we don't push back appropriately on the kind of tasks and decisions that are getting delegated to us. And so when we are already at the boiling point, having somebody say, hey, can you get that deck to me for Monday? Instead of getting into a binary discussion of like, can I or can't I, my coaching is always, okay, the deck's in the mix. How do you want me to rank order this relative to the other two things that, I'm working on right now? Just give me the kind of ABC, what's first, what's second, what's third. And then you can start to have a little bit more productive conversations around volume.
Great conversation, and the insights that you shared were absolutely incredible today. And we hope that our listeners enjoyed this conversation. And again, Dane's got a new book, The Power of Pressure: Why Pressure Isn't the Problem, It's the Solution. You can find it on his website. You can also find it on Amazon. But Dane, for those that want to follow your work and maybe keep posted with what you're doing, whether it's connecting with you on LinkedIn or Twitter, or maybe seeing you, on the road coming up as the world opens up, what is the best way for them to, keep in contact?
Yeah, absolutely. So I am most active on LinkedIn, just, Dane Jensen, and Twitter @Dane Jensen. And then, DaneJensen.com. If you want to watch clips, read articles, all that kind of good stuff, that's where you can find it.
Well, definitely follow him on social media. We'll link to all of his platforms. We'll also link to his book in the show notes below. So if you're listening to this on Spotify or Apple Podcast, just click that link and buy his book. It helps him out. And yeah, that's great. So Dane, we really appreciate you joining us on the Business Communicators this week.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Christmas is coming up. The book, buy it now because shipping is going to be bad.
Good stocking stuffer.
That's right. Your checks are in the mail, guys. I appreciate it. Thank you.
I'll take an autographed copy of the book. I'm good.
All right, Dane, thanks so much. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Dane.
Well, that was a great conversation with Dane Jensen and Hattie Thomas. What are some of your takeaways here?
For me, he said a lot of things that are really, really important. But I think the most is the tip that he gave. No matter where it is, whether you're fresh out of school or you're a top executive, it's about understanding the physicality of it all, and prioritize and understanding what you're doing and all of that. So that is very clear to me, and I think that is so important.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I liked what he said about the junior level, about get to where you can have those honest conversations with it. Only because I seem to have those conversations on a regular basis, either with my team or with my boss, being like, you want all of this stuff done, that's not going to happen in this decade. So I think that was also very important. But yeah, no, I also thought that his passion for the Olympics and for the Paralympics was also very reassuring. Being a fan of people who play the sport for the love of the sport. Yeah, absolutely. And, being a sports guy, I love being able to open up with that, kind of conversation. So, and I will say this, if you do ever have the chance to go to the Paralympic Games, do it. It's, I believe, the second or third largest
sporting event in the world. I can't remember if the Olympics are one or the World Cup's one, and then the Paralympics is right up there. So it's a huge, massive event, and so many inspirational stories and so many badasses. I mean, you've got people who are completely blind running triathlons, swimming, 1.2 miles in open water, riding a bike, running. It's incredible, what these superhumans can do. So special thanks to Dane for joining us on the podcast. And we'll link again all of his contact information. But guys, we've got, a few minutes left in the show. So let's get into two big headlines this week. Facebook has announced that they are changing their name to Meta. And so at their annual conference, CEO Mark Zuckerberg shared his vision for the metaverse and how the company will take part in building its future. He said, quote, "I'm proud of what we've built so far, and I'm excited about what comes next. As we move beyond what's possible today, beyond the constraints of screens, beyond the limits of distance and physics, and towards a future where everyone can be present with each other, create new opportunities and experience new things. It is a future that is beyond any one company and that we will be made by all of us." He said, right now, our brand is so tightly linked to one product that it can't possibly represent everything that we're doing today, let alone in the future. Over time, I hope that we are seen as a metaverse company, and I want to anchor our work and identity on what we're building towards. So it's wild to me to think that, the Facebook was started, nearly 20 years ago as almost a way for Harvard students to connect in the dorm room. And I remember as a freshman in college, they opened it up to high school students. And then when our parents started joining, it was like, oh, really? And now it's, 2 billion users globally, and they're almost reinventing themselves. So I'm curious on your thoughts on the name change to Meta and kind of this whole metaverse concept. So Hattie, I'll go ahead and start off with you.
To be honest, I'm not surprised that they're changing their name. I don't see a problem. The name that they're going to. If you think about not just the fact that how they started, but also where they ended up, also in terms of their reputation, they were having to go to Congress and report on some of the things that were happening from a political standpoint. So it's starting to get more political. So I can understand them needing to take almost have a fresh start, or even, in my own words, kind of distance themselves from Facebook, the name as a whole, to give people something a little bit different. So we'll see how it goes. And will it also, the question would be, what's going to happen to Facebook? They say, oh, there's nothing going to happen. The app will still be there. People can use it. But it'll make me wonder, are they looking to kind of, diminish it or make it go away after a while? Makes me wonder.
I don't know that Facebook is going anywhere. The platform, it's too big. I do think it might be forced to change a little bit, which I don't think would be, completely surprising. But I do think that it is important for them. If they do believe that the future is this metaverse, they own Oculus, which is very, kind of pushing them in that direction, then
right.
I think it makes sense. But Thomas, this isn't the only time we've seen, companies go through a major name change or restructuring. We saw Google do it, in 2014, 2015, somewhere in that time frame, rebranding the company Alphabet and then putting Google as a subsidiary under it. This is slightly a little bit different because I don't think Facebook is planning on a full restructure. But what is your take on, the metaverse or Meta?
My take on this is I feel like it's very much tax driven, finance driven, more so than to get everything under the same umbrella. And what I mean by that is I was reading an article yesterday saying something about, or it was an opinion piece really in the New York Times, and it was saying about why are they changing their names? Nobody's going to be calling like, hey, let's go look on Meta. You talk to Google with Alphabet. Nobody's like, hey, let's go look at what the Alphabet company's doing. No, it's let's go see what Google's doing. And I get that same feeling that Facebook is not going to become Meta. It's going to stay as Facebook. And I know that they're in a lot of trouble with the whistleblower, and I know they're in a lot of trouble with antitrust and everything along those lines. They also, Facebook alone on their ad revenue was like $9.6 billion in their last quarterly report, or something insanely high like that. But I part of me thinks that it's a corporate restructure or a corporate name change for taxes. But then also, somewhere down the road is that if the Congress steps in, hey, you need to spin off some of these companies. Okay, it's real easy to shed WhatsApp from Meta than it is to shed WhatsApp from Facebook.
That's a fair point. And I do want to reiterate that I think, Facebook really understands AR and VR. I mean, we've seen that. I mean, they bought Oculus several years ago. We're starting to see, like Snapchat. They've had the augmented reality down for so long, and so many tech companies are moving into that. We saw Google Glass, that was trying to be a thing. Apple with their animojis and all of that. So it's fascinating, and I'm really curious to see where the Metaverse takes us. But I do want to show a quick video.
I was going to say, I'm sorry I misspoke. It's actually $29 billion.
Oh.
We know it's billions, right?
But it's not 9 billion. It's 29 billion.
29 billion is a lot more than
in 3 months of ad revenue, just to put it in perspective.
Thomas, I kind of, now that I hear you talking about it, it does make a lot of sense to put it all under one umbrella, since you have all these different apps. And again, I also believe, because Facebook has had so many issues, this is the best opportunity for them to start fresh too, with this new name. I don't see Facebook going away either, but I just think it's a great opportunity for start fresh.
Yeah, and a lot of people have to remember, Facebook is still an incredibly young company.
Oh yeah.
I mean, we talk about Apple as sort of like the benchmark in technology. Apple's been around for twice as long as Facebook, and it's just incredible to see how quickly they're pivoting. I mean, in less than 20 years. But I do want to share a quick video. This is actually something that I found on Twitter, and it was kind of, I thought it was funny because Daniel Vaughn, who we had on in season 3 of the podcast, he's the barbecue editor for Texas Monthly. He recently released the top 50 barbecue spots in Texas. And we actually got a lot of feedback from that. People thinking that we made the list and that we didn't include barbecue slots. But this video regarding Facebook, I thought really played well. So we'll go ahead and share it right now on the screen.
I figured, let's make this special. So we've put together something that I think is really going to give you a feeling for what this future could be like.
Is that a bottle of Sweet Baby Ray's barbecue sauce on his bookshelf?
There's 2 parts that came to my mind when I saw that the first time, was because everybody thinks Mark Zuckerberg is a robot. He works very hard to come across as an individual. And he probably over practices sometimes. So when we were talking pressure, I'm like, well, it's hard to have pressure for Mark Zuckerberg when he's a robot. But then the other thing that comes to my mind is we talk about, Hattie, we've given you a hard time about what's your background with the virtual, where it's like, hey, look, there's a football helmet in your background and the shadows are off. But it does make me think about, being ideal, what's behind you to tell that story about you. And while, yes, I have a white wall behind me, bookshelves are ordered.
We all have really bad backgrounds right now. I mean, I've got like a bathroom behind me. Like we need something like Dane's, that dark, nice lighting office bookshelf type thing.
Enough to tell his story, things like that. But then Sweet Baby Ray's, and it's funny you mentioned Daniel Vaughn, because he actually in the article was talking about how sauces are starting to come full swing in Texas, where Texas has always been like, you don't put sauce on barbecue? What? But yeah, Sweet Baby Ray's on a bookshelf, not refrigerated after opening. Yeah, I question that if it wasn't placed by somebody else. Or I wonder if Sweet Baby Ray's paid him a lot of money to put it there.
It could have been.
If they did, they didn't make any money because it's turned to the side.
True.
That's just bad positioning, bro.
I don't think it was the $29 billion in advertising. I don't think that's what it equated to. But interesting news on Facebook, on Meta. So we'll continue to follow that as more comes out. They do have the MVRS stock ticker, which I think debuts in December.
Yep.
So really curious to see how that all transpires. But let's go to our last topic of the day, and that's Enes Kanter. So if you're not familiar with Enes Kanter plays basketball for the Boston Celtics. He was born in Turkey. He played basketball for like a week at the University of Kentucky before he was ruled ineligible due to I think it was his amateur status was under question. I don't know if I have that exactly right. Regardless, now with the new NIL legislation, he would have been fine. He would have been able to continue to play, but he was an NBA lottery pick. He's been around in the league for several years, but he's been very open about political issues globally and, kind of his thoughts on it. He's been very open against President Erdogan in Turkey and just sort of the dictatorship that is happening there. And I think he's actually been told that if he does arrive in Turkey, he will be arrested on the spot. So his family is under a lot of pressure in Turkey as well. But over the past few weeks, he's been making China his target. And he's been focusing on, I think the first video that he did was on Hong Kong and how, freedom needed to actually happen there. And then his next video was on, the slave labor that is going on in China. And then his latest video actually targeted Nike. So I'm going to play just a clip of it. He posted this on his Twitter page and it was a full 3.5 minute clip. He's also worn shoes to kind of highlight some of his, causes that he's advocating for. But I'm going to play just a little bit of the clip right now on the podcast.
Did you know that almost the entire apparel and footwear industry is tainted by Uyghur forced labor? Many well-known global brands are implicated, and yes, that includes one of the NBA's biggest sponsors, Nike. Nike claims that they do not allow any forced labor in their supply chains, yet they don't have the receipt to prove it. They have not publicly committed to cutting ties with the Chinese government's labor transfer scheme. They have not provided clear timelines or updates about their efforts to end this. They have not publicly committed to the steps outlined by the coalition to end Uyghur forced labor. Don't forget, every time you put those shoes on your feet or you put that t-shirt on your back, there are so many tears and so much oppression and so much blood behind it all. Nike likes to say, just do it. Well, what are you doing about the slave labor that makes your shoes? That slave labor that makes you rich? To the owner of Nike, Phil Knight, I have a message for you. How about I book a plane tickets for us? Let's fly to China together. We can try to visit these slave labor camps and you can see it with your own eyes. LeBron James and Michael Jordan, you guys are welcome to come too. Nike must be a participant in this. Stop with hypocrisy. Stop the modern day slavery now.
It's a pretty powerful video. And for him to take this stance against, while active in the NBA, I think is incredible because 2 years ago, we saw Daryl Morey, who is the general manager of the Houston Rockets, put out a tweet saying, fight for freedom, stand for Hong Kong. And China basically said, all right, the Houston Rockets no longer going to be shown on Tennis.it, which is the channel that shows the NBA in China. Now with this, they no longer show the Boston Celtics. And the NBA has really tried to distance themselves from, Daryl Morey, Enes Kanter for making some of these comments because China is so important for the NBA. And now he's also taking on Nike, which is the apparel sponsor for the entire league. And this is interesting because he does call out Michael Jordan, who obviously his Jordan brand is, one of the biggest sellers for Nike. And he calls out LeBron James, who his shoes, again, some of the biggest sellers for Nike. I'm curious from your take on this, because we've seen that Nike has really advocated for a lot of social justice issues and has done a great job here in the United States. How difficult is it for Nike and the NBA to kind of be put in this position where, maybe Enes Kanter, who does have a big platform, is maybe bringing up some of these issues?
This is what I'm going to say. If Nike gave him a shoe deal tomorrow, he would be off the air. What's interesting to me is he's one person. You say he has a large platform. Where is his support? I guess he's going to be the Colin Kaepernick for 2022. I don't know. So why I empathize with him, he has his opinion. He's calling people hypocrites, but you're going to have to come to the table with some facts. And maybe he has some. I haven't seen them yet. He's calling out people, but he's not putting, show me, get your own plane ticket, go over to China and you film that and bring it back. In other words, don't just talk about it, be about it.
I see your point, but he has, I mean, we didn't show the full clip. He's done several of these videos, but it's very well documented that there's slave labor and genocide going on in China.
That's fine. What I'm trying to say is, how come he has no support? He's the one person who is saying this.
He has millions of people throughout the world supporting him. It's the NBA isn't supporting them because they have a multi-billion-dollar contract with Nike, and they get multi-billions of dollars in ad sales revenue from the Chinese government.
And that's going to happen.
I think the real challenge comes into play is, especially in the apparel and footwear markets, is we've always heard about, hey, we're moving jobs or manufacturing jobs to China or Vietnam or the Philippines, or Malaysia. The list goes on of different places with, for lack of a better statement, cheap labor, even though in certain countries it's free labor. Not good free labor. I want to go on the record, not good free labor, because it's slave labor.
There's no such thing as good free labor, yeah.
Or child labor, and this has always been the challenge. And yeah, Nike takes a stand about it, or let me rephrase that. Their PR team takes a stand about it. But until somebody actually makes the point to go over there and see it, and I think that the plane ticket to China is all lip service, because you still need to get visas to go over there.
Well,
and if you go over there to take a tour, I guarantee that the factories that they tour won't have a single shred of what you're talking about.
They won't. And I would love to hear what Nike's response is to
they've been
all
silent.
of this. And that's what I'm saying. They're silent. So
it's interesting you say that, because when he was saying his thing about, hey, let's go see it, let's do this, there was a documentary on Netflix about Seaspiracy, and it was talking about sustainable fishing and everything like that. But what it really boiled down to it was the plastic in the ocean is coming from the fishing, and how all these companies say that we're dolphin free or turtle free, and they say that, yeah, the inspectors, they self-report, and the inspectors that do go on the boat wind up not coming back. And so unless Nike takes a stand saying, we want to see the bill of sale, we want to tour the factories, we want to be able to do spot checks of your factories, nothing's going to change.
Yeah, it's something that is very tough for a lot of these global companies, that they might stand for certain issues in progressive countries, but in some countries where it's very important, like look at the oil industry, for example, like operating, in Saudi Arabia, Iran, Iraq, those countries, Afghanistan, the Middle East, not Afghanistan, but the Middle East, where, human rights issues can be put up, for question, operating in China, like they understand, but they understand that they have to be able to turn a profit, and it's difficult. But I do want to commend Enes Kanter for stepping up, and I will say, he's made this public. I mean, he's played in the league for 10 years, and I like that he's speaking his mind. I think all athletes should be able to speak their mind on topics. I hate the commentary that you see on like Fox News when LeBron says something and they're like, just shut up and dribble. You're people, you're a person too. I mean,
they're influencers too. And
yeah.
I see why he called out Michael and he called out LeBron, because they have influence.
Yep.
I don't know that anything's going to stop it or anything's going to change it.
No. The only thing that's going to possibly change it or stop it is us as consumers. Austin's got a Nike shirt on, is not buying the Nike shirt. I've got a Columbia shirt, not buying the Columbia shirt. That's the only way the change is going to happen.
Yeah.
But I don't think people understand is that it's a lot cheaper to produce products, consumer products, and other places. And unless you get comfortable with paying 2, 3, 4 times the cost for a pair of tennis shoes, that's why I said it starts with the consumer at the end of the day.
If you pay for it, they're going to keep making it, and they're going to keep charging you 2 to 3 times. So, and it's probably, like I said, I don't know what's going to happen with all of this. I empathize with what he's saying. To me, it's just the way he's going about it.
Yeah, I will say that I will say though
mm.
that this isn't something new for him. Let's
No.
be very, very clear. In 2017, he actually wrote a post for the Players Tribune, which I believe Derek Jeter owns, and it's just a forum for athletes to, kind of get into journalism. Some of them have like ghostwriters that help them out, but he was very critical of the Turkish government and Erdogan. This is like right after the coup happened, and there's a lot of people who, although it's a democracy, it's not a democracy. It's not free. It's not open. And again, he's put his life at risk, his family's life at risk. He can't go back to his home country. But because of his comments, Nike, didn't sponsor him. And because the Nike, sponsors a lot of NBA. So he actually had a conversation with the Vice Sports, and here's a little clip from the interview. It says, the emotional toll is obvious, but Cantor's sacrifice is as evident elsewhere. He can't leave North America and hasn't been able to secure any endorsement deals. Nike, the same company that championed Colin Kaepernick's controversial remonstration by putting him on the front lines of a recent ad campaign, now refuses to sign Cantor. He said that I talked to Nike and they said, we want to give Enes a contract. We're watching him, but if we give him a contract, they will shut down every store in Turkey. So we cannot give him a contract, he says. I'm an NBA player with no shoe deal, no endorsement deal, and I play in New York.
Well, I got a question.
Yeah.
Colin Kaepernick was protesting racism.
In the U.S. U.S.
Yes, but let me finish also, too. He didn't criticize Nike, did he?
No.
Okay, these are two separate issues. This guy is how you want a shoe deal, but you're criticizing the very businesses who can offer this to you. So make up your mind. You can't have it both ways, brother.
So the shoe deal, this was again 4 to 5 years ago when this conversation happened. And I will say this is, if you go back and actually follow Enes, it's not specifically about Nike. His bigger issue is with freeing Tibet, freeing Hong Kong, stopping the genocide that's going on. Nike is just a small portion.
And then you know what else could come out of it now that he is criticizing Nike? It sounds vindictive because he didn't get a shoe deal.
A little bit.
Perhaps.
That's the impression some people will get too.
With social media, we talk Facebook, we talked everything like that. I'm glad Colin Kaepernick started the conversation about racism in sports. I'm glad that this guy's helping shed light on child.
He didn't start the conversation. They've been talking about it. He just brought light to it because he took a knee on it.
Yeah.
He has a bigger microphone. I would start, it's the wrong word. He has a bigger microphone and people started taking more notice to it. And so maybe he will actually start to bring notice to slave labor and child labor in foreign countries.
Yeah. But
that's my take on it.
Sometimes we're just, we have uncomfortable situations, and when we're called out on something, we just don't like talking about it. So that's it's going to be interesting to follow and see if the social change that we've seen, kind of, or the effort to make social change here in the United States actually translates over into some of these countries where there is a lot of oppression still going on. But anyways, fascinating conversation with Dane Jensen today with Facebook and the transition to Meta, and also Enes Kanter. But we hope that you enjoyed this episode of the podcast. Of course, you can follow us on social media. Just search @BizCommunicator on all of the platforms. We're there. We're active. We're live. But Thomas, Hattie, any parting words before we wrap this show up for the week?
We're almost into November, the cool weather, and I am so happy.
I didn't say it. As we go into Halloween and the holidays,
when people listen to this, Halloween's over.
No, I know that, but it's just I always use Halloween as kind of like the trigger for, okay, now it's time for the holiday season. It's time.
Why do we call Halloween a holiday? We don't get the day off.
Because you're celebrating All Hallows Eve or Dia de Muertos, if you're in, but that's actually November, first part of November. I don't know why, because you get to dress up and you get to put on your alter ego.
It was a rhetorical question.
But what I'm saying is this is the time to push back, decompress, spend time with your loved ones, understand that everybody be more forgiving in life, especially as we come out of a pandemic and everybody's going through their own struggles. But then also try to do better yourself. Take time, breathe for yourself, get your sleep, get your rest, get your good food. Start working out because it's the holidays, so let's get ready to eat a lot more food, turkey and everything else. But do better. Start that New Year's resolution now versus 3 months from now.
Or don't make any resolution and just give yourself grace.
Fair enough. Give yourself grace. Be kind. I think those are the takeaways for this podcast. But we hope everyone enjoyed this episode of the Business Communicators. And special thanks to Dane Jensen for joining us on this show. Be sure to check out the show notes below, buy his book. And we hope that you enjoyed this. Follow us on social media at Biz Communicator. And on behalf of our guests this week, Dane Jensen, and my co-hosts Hattie Horn and Thomas Bain, my name's Austin Staton, and we'll see you next week.